And welcome to the Redevelopment Agency meeting of the 10th of April, 2018. We're going to kick this meeting off with general comments to the board. Staff has comment cards at the entrance, and if anybody in the audience would like to speak to the board, now is your chance. I see one arm. Terry, if you wouldn't mind coming up and introducing yourself. Public comment is 2 minutes.
Is this working?
That works.
Hi, my name is Terry Marasco, and the light's on.
Is that better?
That's all I need. More energy.
Pull it really close to your mouth. And
Okay. All right. Anyway, Terry Marasco. I've been working with the West Side communities for a few months on the inland port, and I wrote the op-ed, which you may have seen on Sunday. A couple of things about that, just a few comments. Over the 10 years since the first study came out, Salt Lake has changed dramatically. It's got City Creek, it's got all kinds of things going on downtown, and yet the west side, we think, is the most needy part of the city for certain kinds of things, whether it's farmers markets or anything else for that matter. I lived in San Francisco for 25 years, and I saw the ferry building develop as a market. It used to be a derelict building. It developed into a very fine market. However, it developed into a yuppie, expensive, $5 a pound organic apple market, which is something certainly we don't need for this city and certainly don't need that on the west side. The last comment is, in working with these folks for the last few months, including staging a press conference from the governor's office on the inland port, that part of the city has been the most vocal support of the mayor's and your position on the inland port in SB 234. And if anything, they deserve a whole lot more attention, and certainly a public market in that community at Fair Park would help out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marasco. Is there anybody else in the audience who'd like to speak today in person? And for those tuning in at home or online, you can always write us your comments, send it to 451 South State. You can always tune in to slcrda.com as well. Let's see. We are now going to move on to public hearings. Our only public hearing today is for the Stadler Rail Single Property Community Reinvestment Area. Is there anybody that would like to speak to this issue today? All right. In that case, we will move on to item C. Excuse me. I will look to my colleagues to for a motion.
I'll move we close the public hearing.
It's been moved by Board Member Mendenhall and a second by Board Member Fowler. All those in favor?
Aye.
And that motion carries. We are now on to item C, Redevelopment Agency Business, which is also in regard to the Stadler Rail Community Reinvestment Area out in the northwest quadrant. We have City Council staff as well as the Redevelopment Agency staff. We have Danny Waltz, Jill Wilkerson-Smith, Allison Rowland, and if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
I am Susan Becker from Zion's Public Finance.
Thank you for joining us today.
I apologize, she wasn't on the names list.
It's okay, I just don't have it in front of me. She may have been. Hello? Do you want a break? No?
Talk really
Okay.
We can do that.
So point of clarification, it sounds like the audio is working for those at home, but not for us in this room, so please speak loudly. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much. First off, on behalf of the administration and the Economic Development Department, I would like to thank the board members for their patience as we have brought this Stadler project to you. What started probably over a year ago with Laura's team in terms of a business prospect, evolved into an RDA new program and policy for single parcel creation, and we are fully prepared to discuss that this evening. And then obviously this has become part of the collateral damage and fallout from SB 234. So wanted to thank you, the board members, for your patience and your time in allowing us to sort through this, specifically the chair and the co-chair, as they have met with us and Stadler of trying to make sure we bring this to you appropriately. And then finally, city council staff as well for the time that they've spent working with us and making sure that this is coming to you as in the process and in a format that you can take action on it, hopefully today. So having said that, I'm going to turn the time over to Jill and Susie. We're going to go through a PowerPoint presentation that is designed to cover all of the aspects in terms of background of the project area creation process, as well as the financial review that is part of that approval by the board and ultimately the city council. And then we have Jacob Splan and, sorry, I forgot, Fabio Mueller from Stadler here, and they would also like to speak to the board as well. So I'll turn it over to Jill and we'll start the presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Just to remind the board, you did adopt a single property business retention tool program last year as part of our tax increment reimbursement policy. And the whole purpose of that is to create projects that are required to meet economic goals of business retention and expansion. In the policy, you have the option to participate by giving tax increment to the recipient either at a 70, 80, or 90% participation, depending on meeting the threshold and additional policy requirements that are in the reimbursement policy. Stadler has submitted a request to us for 90% of the participation, and we will get to the whole reasoning behind the 90% request. So just to give you a little background on Stadler, they are a train and rail car manufacturer based in Switzerland. They've been in business for 75 years. They have several locations throughout Europe. They only have one here in Salt Lake City, so we're really proud to have them here. Currently it has 150 employees, and this is just north of our West Capitol Hill project area. And they have 7,000 employees total. Their new project, which is just now getting under construction, is located at 5600 West, just south of Interstate 80. They plan to build a 950,000 square foot facility in 4 phases. So phase 1 is currently underway. 300 employees will occupy phase 1. That will include 150 of those employees at their current site, so they will move to the new site. They are currently putting in the site improvements, and I just saw some pictures of walls going up, so we're really encouraged that they're making some progress out there. I should note that they are trying to get their first phase done, at least in a temporary certificate of occupancy by August, so that they can start filling orders because they have demand.
Excuse me. Jill, would you mind sending those photos to the board so we can have a peek? I think they offered a tour to all board members as well if you'd like to check it out, but will you send the photos as well?
Absolutely, we can send photos, no problem.
I went on the tour. It's very fascinating. You should all go. Jacob's a great tour guide. So there's an underground tunnel for fire safety, and it's awesome. So everyone should go check it out.
That's great. We did forward an invitation to all of you, and I know that the tours, we can only fit like 6 or 7 people per tour, so we can set up multiple tours if necessary to accommodate all of the council and any council staff that would like to go see the project. Just to let you know, the CRA plan components, this is included in your packet. Basically, it comes down to 3 elements. One is the CRA plan, which is written in accordance with the Utah Code. And the guiding document that we used for that is the Northwest Quadrant Master Plan. That's pretty straightforward. And then at the end of the plan, we have the CRA budget. It reflects the total budget with all participating taxing entities. So we kind of estimated that we would get a total of 70% participation across the board from any taxing entity. So we have some room if we have future interest in other taxing entities coming in and being a part of the tax increment reimbursement. But what we really want to focus on right now is talking about the financial benefit analysis. So Susie Becker, who is our consultant from Zions, is going to run through that analysis, and then we'll wrap it up by with talking about where the Finance Committee came in with their recommendations and the costs associated with the project.
Great, thanks, Jill. Our role was to provide an independent third-party objective analysis of the public benefit and fiscal impact from the proposed development. The analysis rests on the proposed development pattern, which Jill has talked about, in 4 phases, 950,000 square feet of building space, and about 174 million in investment in land and buildings, not including equipment and personal property as well. If you look at the site today, it's vacant, it's held in Greenbelt, and the taxable value is extremely low. Therefore, over the next 20-year period, which is sort of the time from the analysis, it would only generate just over $1,000 to all of the various taxing entities, not only the city, but the county, school district, water districts, everyone, which is amazing, but because it's so low. However, if it develops as Stadler has projected with those development projections we just showed you, over 20 years at the end of this, over the build-out time, it would generate $40 million over the next 20 years, over the entire 20-year period, to all of the taxing entities, significantly more than the $1,000 if it remains undeveloped. However, we know that something will happen likely on this property. So what is a good comparative? So if we look at the map, we pulled some industrial-type business park development surrounding Stadler property or in the near neighborhood to see what type of taxable value per acre they had. And if we compare the taxable value per acre from these other parcels, we take their total taxable value divided by the acreage, you can see that Stadler, after phase 4, would have by far the highest taxable value per acre, nearly 2.8 million. And then you can see the others in descending order there in that neighborhood, which means ongoing benefit for all of the taxing entities, not only through the 20-year period, but thereafter. Let's just zero in now, and not all the taxing entities, but talk just a minute about what does it mean for Salt Lake City? What are the fiscal impacts? So the projected revenues for the city over the entire 20-year period, it'd be about $15 million, mainly driven by property tax, but we also have municipal energy tax. We had estimates of usage provided by Dominion and Rocky Mountain Power, and also with some road miles in there on your road funds. Of course, revenues are offset to some extent by expenses. So just to get a general idea, this was not a detailed cost of service study for every department in Salt Lake City. It was an idea. I wanted to get an idea of what expenses would be. So we took the general fund budget, as you have posted with the Utah State Auditor's Office online, your general fund, and we divided it by the total number of acres in Salt Lake City to come up with an average expense cost per acre. And we asked the question of the departments here, would there be any extraordinary costs involved with servicing Stadler? And there were not. It's also our experience that industrial business park development often has lower calls for service, lower other costs of city services than some other types of development. And so we felt that just using this average was a conservative estimate at best, comparing the expenses to the revenues. So as we look there, the revenues per acre were about 12,000. City average expenses per acre are significantly less at about 3,800, leaving Stadler with net revenues per acre multiplied by their total acres would give you really net revenues of about $500,000 per year for Salt Lake City alone. Just a couple of the benefits quickly. In terms of job creation, nearly 1,000 jobs, 150 of those represent retained jobs through after phase 4. The average Stadler wage, based on information provided by Stadler, would be just over $55,000, which is about 10% higher, 10% higher than the average county wage of $50,000. And a significant number of these jobs in the first phase, at least, were over $70,000, which are good paying jobs. Finally, there are some other benefits in addition to fiscal. You would get some additional infrastructure, 5,000 linear feet of new roads. That's going to open up access to another 184 acres for development. A lot of cooperation on Stadler's part. They seem very willing and eager, very cooperative in working with other entities. Dominion Gas, as they put a pipeline in the Northwest quadrant, through the state on a sewer line through that area, and with Rocky Mountain Power on a substation as well. And finally, there would be one-time benefits in addition to the ongoing benefits to the city in terms of added construction employment and supplies that might, for the construction, be bought in the local area, which would generate sales tax revenues for the city as well. And that's a quick summary of the public benefit.
Council members, or board members, excuse me, I'd like to stop here and open it up to questions if there's anybody that has a question. Erin?
Thank you. I feel like I have cotton balls in my ears. I can't hear as well as we usually do. Is it
Susie.
Susie, thank you for the analysis you've provided. As you know, this is our very first dance with the single property CRA and the financial analysis, the third party analysis that was so important to us as a board to consider our options. And so with that as context, I'm wondering about whether or not your analysis would have taken into consideration any other incentives that other government agencies may be looking at in this project, and if the analysis might look different if there were, say, millions of dollars coming from the county or the state into this project.
I think we have a future slide that will answer that question, because what we are doing is we're going to show you what the cost of the project will be and the subsequent gap that Stadler will have, which is pretty substantial.
This is a slide from RDA staff or from Sue's?
It's from RDA, yeah.
Okay, so that's not my question, though. My question is if the third-party analysis would consider, if you had known, if there were such incentives from other agencies, would you have considered that in your analysis?
Well, certainly. I mean, we're looking at is there reasonable means or appropriate to give incentives in this case. And I think you could certainly make the argument in some cases that if you're going to give away far more than you need to have it occur, that then it wouldn't be appropriate. And I think Jill's slide, we've discussed that. We've kind of met as a group. And so we kind of coordinated, and we're aware of that. And we don't feel that that is the case. In this case, there is a gap between what is needed. There's significant infrastructure needed in this area. And I think that Jill's slides will clearly show that. But we certainly are aware of that and have been part of the process, had several meetings with Danny and Jill as we've gone through the process.
And I'm sorry, you don't feel that what is the case after your consideration of the other incentives?
I feel like there's still a gap between the extraordinary infrastructure costs and what's being provided. I don't feel like there's being more provided than is needed.
Okay, and I don't think that I have any doubt that there are there's more of a need than we're able to probably provide, and yet there is consideration that we have to make as those who are elected to be accountable for those tax dollars about all the context of all of the incentives at play in the package, and to what degree do we commit. And perhaps we're not actually going to get to that extent of the conversation today about a percentage. I don't know. But
to me, the compelling slide is the one on the comparative development where we show the nearly 2.8 million taxable value per acre compared to what is happening in the market without some incentives and without some public assistance.
I couldn't hear it either.
Sorry, is this on?
No.
The green light is working though. I will just talk
Having
louder.
a migraine right now.
Okay, that's good to know. If you look at the comparative development, Jill's got us back there. When you look at the taxable value per acre on this one, it is compellingly, significantly higher than the taxable value that's just occurring through market forces in the neighborhood. And so that to me is the best indicator. If we can do this, where it's a win-win situation, we're going to be far better off on our tax base. All of the taxing entities, the schools, the school children, the county, the water district, everyone is going to come out and benefit for years from this added amount of property tax that will be paid year after year. So that to me is the most compelling slide, that this may be a project worthy of some sort of consideration. And then you have to determine the amount that you feel is necessary. And I think that differs, and we all, struggle with that. You want it to be fair and equitable, but we do have extraordinary infrastructure costs in this instance, and Joel's going to go through some of those, which I think helps answer that question.
Board member, do you have anything else?
No, I'll look forward to the other slides.
The slide is coming.
So I just want to ask one quick question, Susie. On the average Stadler wage, 55,000 and some, you said that was self-reported data that you were referring to. Is there any sort of performance reporting that the RDA has considered on this? And if so, what would that look like? To Aaron's point that this is the first time we've wrestled with a single property CRA for economic development purposes, what are we going to get in the long run, and how are we going to prove that we're getting what we're suggested?
Yes. So to answer that, that will be one of the ongoing monitoring and compliance requirements that will be included in the specific reimbursement agreement between the agency and Stadler. And essentially what that does is that sets up these benchmarks and milestones that they're required to meet annually as part of reimbursing them or sending them their check. We will sign off on whether that's been met, and that's a monitoring issue that they will have to provide documentation showing where their wages are at.
Thank you. All right, if you want to pick it up, go ahead. Thanks.
Sure. So just to give you an idea, this is the estimate of the total distribution of tax increment for the project that that Susie has calculated and is in the financial benefit analysis. After the city retains its 10%, about 11.3 will go to the RDA. Then we need to deduct, statutorily we're required to put 10% toward housing. Then we would keep a small administrative fee. That takes our bottom line to 9.6 that we would distribute to the project over a 20-year period. Thought it would be helpful to show you a map of Stadler, and of course some of you will get a tour so you get to see this in person, but just to give you an idea of the improvements that we are proposing to reimburse in the project, which include the test track where they're going to test the rail cars. They need to raise the track, and they're going to provide a rail spur to other uses for free, is my understanding. They have substantial site grading that they need to do, and a canal that runs through the project, which is a very high cost item. Plus, they're going to be building some public roads and utilities that will not only service the project, but also service future development around the project. And I should note that they are a little bit off-site, but the statute does allow for the RDA board to allow for funding those improvements, even though they're slightly outside of the project area boundary. So when we look at the updated infrastructure costs, and we just got these from Stadler this week, so they are up to date with site grading, the raising of the track, the public roads and utilities, and the text track combined come at about $20.8 million. If you take out our reimbursement at 9.6, there is a significant project gap of $11.2 million. So if we have other taxing entities that come in and want to participate, there's plenty of gap to help assist with. Just wanted to run through also the other part of the policy that's really important to the board is that 70, 80, and 90% participation that it may choose to offer to the project, given whether or not they meet those threshold requirements, whether or not they meet those criteria, up to 2 for the 80%. And also special consideration, which takes into consideration the extraordinary project cost burden. When we discussed this with the Finance Committee, they felt that all these criteria have been met, and their recommendation is for the city to give the 90% participation. So just to go to the action that we are asking the board
Bill.
and the city
Bill.
council to
Hey, we have audio.
Oh, sorry. Can I answer questions?
Board member Mendenhall, please.
Thank you. The Finance Committee recommendations those are just based on the criteria that we established with the single property ordinance,
Yes.
Yes.
not with the third party analysis
They are
consideration.
based on the third-party analysis. So they
Okay.
review the third-party analysis, and they made these recommendations based on the analysis.
And,
Sorry.
and if I may chime in, Board Member Mendenhall, I think also what you'd probably be interested in knowing is the Finance Committee at the time that they reviewed this, we did not know the details or the amounts of any other participation by other taxing entities. And so I want to add that.
Yes, Vice Chair.
Would that change anything? If we had known or do know what any sort of participation by other taxing entities would be?
I don't think it would have changed anything in terms of our staff recommendation. I think as Jill mentioned, there's still a significant gap. And so that additional amount doesn't even fully cover that gap. And so even after that participation, there's a burden that Stadler has. But I just wanted to make it clear that that was not taken into account as part of that recommendation. But I don't think it would have changed their recommendation, not fully being able to speak to them, all of them, but Susie indicated it still, as part of the financial analysis, would have demonstrated a gap that was needed to fill.
And is that typically how we evaluate what percentage we're going to give a project, is without looking at what other incentives they're getting from the taxing entities?
No, typically you would involve all of that as part of your gap analysis. And so that's why I wanted to make sure that when we did that justification, we did not have that information. And so as the board determines what percentage you're comfortable at, just wanted you to know that this is new information that's come to light. Still shows a gap. We still feel the 90% is warranted, but just out of full transparency and disclosure, that wasn't part of the information packet at that time.
And I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, Jill, do you want to wrap it up?
Sure, wrap it up. So just to kind of talk about what we're looking for today is for the board to consider adopting a resolution to create the Stadler CRA and a resolution for the interlocal agreement between the Salt Lake City and the Redevelopment Agency. So what that would do is it would authorize the Salt Lake City to give that distribution of tax increment to the RDA so that then we can distribute it to Stadler. And then there are some future actions with the City Council. City Council will go through the same procedure and adopt it on their side. And then the board will also be reviewing the terms of a tax increment reimbursement agreement between the RDA and Stadler in May. And I believe you have a motion sheet that's been prepared by council offices. And that's the end of our presentation.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you. Board members, Board Member Menden, or Fowler.
I knew that the representative, from Stadler wanted to speak, so I just, did we have
Yes.
questions before they speak?
I would
wanna-
actually like to talk a little bit more about this proposal for the 90% and just get some feedback from board members. I don't know if there's any thoughts, comments, feedback.
I guess I want to just ask Danny a question on the spur rail line, if that's okay.
Please.
In our packet, we have a map showing the outline of the CRA area. And I know that the spur line is west of 5600 West. It goes underneath I-80. How is that going to work with what they call the inland port? And
Jacob may be better to answer that in terms of the
I know that they're going to have
specifics.
access. I know because we want to make sure that it's not impeding, right? That it's a fluid machine, right? So
Yeah.
I guess I just want to have that answer.
And my understanding is Stadler has had to do both improvements to the shared rail line as well as their own individual test track. And so any details beyond that, I'd have Jacob speak to. But
That'd be great. And
to
then
the
just
improvements for the shared line, that
my
benefits the
question
whole
also
area.
is, have you met with the majority owners out there in the Northwest Quadrant? Have you gone over your plans and discussed it with them?
Yeah. So,
Jacob's fine. Thanks for allowing
Come,
us to
come on up.
speak. Oh, you want me to come up?
What you
Yeah.
might as well come up now.
Yes, so on that map, there's our test track, which is specific to turning the trains on, that also allows freight to travel over that. And then there is a shared use industry spur that you can see highlighted in purple there, that does connect to the Salt Lake Garfield Western Short Line, right about at the interchange. That's where we'll put in the switch. And that will go through our property and serve the properties to the west all the way out to Mountain View corridor to the proposed route. We have it in our agreement, our purchase agreement with the church that we're going through, that it's an open access that we will negotiate and not impede at any unreasonable efforts. And yes, we've been working with the Short Line Hogels and the PRI and the other tenants that they have looking at the area. And it was very clear as our proposal of going to this property that we'd maintain open access for the northwest quadrant going through that spur. So, but that is south of the existing Hogle spur line, so to cross that and get into north of I-80 is a separate conversation, but something we are more than willing to make sure and we work with as that comes. But that spur line would easily serve everything south of I-80.
And it's not going to be parallel, so if there's rail on it right now, that it's not going to clog the lane, right? It will have
It's a separate line. So what Hogle has is their transloading and their spur line. This would be a separate, a thoroughfare, more say that not would be staging, but actually just allow passage through the area.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Do you want to bring your companion up and give us your
Sure.
presentation at this time? Half of you are here anyway.
They're working now. So, dear council members, my name is Fabian Mueller. I'm the head of procurement and logistics of Stadler US. And as Martin's currently on a business trip in Switzerland, actually discussing this very project, he asked me to address a couple of words to you. Dear council members, I sincerely apologize for my absence from today's meeting. As I am in Switzerland on business this week, I have asked my deputy, Fabian Mueller, to read this statement on my behalf. Today, we're coming together to create a tremendous opportunity for Stadler, as well as for Salt Lake City and its surrounding communities. Salt Lake City is facing the unique and rare possibility of supporting a privately owned company making a large foreign direct investment. We believe our presence in the Northwest Quadrant is a win not only for us, but also for Salt Lake City, Salt Lake County, and Utah. Our vision is to build state-of-the-art trains in Salt Lake City for the North American market by transferring industry-leading, cutting-edge technology from Switzerland to the United States. In doing so, we bring a public benefit to the Salt Lake area, including the following. Job creation. We're creating skilled jobs for Salt Lake City and Salt Lake County. Stadler hired over 120 employees in 2017, and we're planning on hiring at least another 130 during 2018. Those employees, including technicians, engineers, and many others, will work and live in the Salt Lake area and spend their money here, including spending for sales taxes. Infrastructure improvements. In building our facility, we're going to connect 150 South with 300 South, and we're bringing utilities into the area, as well as state-of-the-art transit solutions for the city, built right here in Salt Lake. Training and education. Stadler is working with local community colleges to launch a vocational education program. The goal of this program is to allow debt-free education for those wanting a technical job. The program will provide a skilled workforce for our communities. Stadler is committed to the U.S. market and its growth. We anticipate that we will train and employ up to 1,000 employees within the next 10 years, which will bring more direct investment to Utah. The adoption of the CRA plan and the approval of the interlocal agreement are the final critical steps in a process that would allow Stadler to establish a permanent residency in Salt Lake City. Without the tax increment reimbursement, Stadler could not enter into the subdivision improvement construction agreement with the city, which is due this month. We hope that the City Council understands the urgency of the project and our need for this agreement, as well as the massive opportunity for both the region, the city, and Stadler. In closing, I would like again to thank you on behalf of Stadler for your consideration. We ask you to move forward with the adoption of the CRA plan and the approval of the interlocal agreement so that we may move forward with our new facility in order to bring business, jobs, and local value add to the Salt Lake area. Yours sincerely, Martin Ritter, CEO, Stadler US.
Thank you very much. Would you like to add anything?
No, just thanks
Okay.
for the opportunity to speak.
You're welcome. I think I would like to open this up to board members. You know, this is a big issue. It's the only item on our agenda today. Board member Fowler, please.
First, I want to say thank you both to the RDA staff and to the staff of Stadler for meeting with us. Board Member Kitchen and I had the opportunity to meet and have kind of a lot of questions answered, and it was very helpful. And as I mentioned, I went out to the site, and it's actually really, I'm a visual learner, so it was very helpful to see everything and to see all of the work that's going on out there. So thank you for accommodating us and me and for answering all the questions and all the work done on this. You know, obviously, the big question isn't whether or not we want to partner with Stadler or make sure that this goes forward. It is that there's this unknown of the 90% tax increment, right?
It's the unknown of whether we will have the ability to collect any tax increment, yes.
And how, I mean, that would have, we have some language here that would have to, that's a risk that Stadler would take if we cannot pay that $9.6 million over 20 years.
Yes.
Is that accurate?
Yep. That's exactly accurate, and that is a risk that Stadler has indicated they are willing to take because they believe in the project and they believe in the partnership with Salt Lake City.
Board Member Wharton.
So we previously heard from other businesses that wanted to be included in the area that creation, or they're creating the CRA could impact legislation, the 234 legislation. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes.
And whether that threat exists for this project as well?
So two different components of that. First and foremost, yes, as part of our creation of a project area north of I-80, through the dialogue and the conversations that happened surrounding the legislative session and specifically SB 234, we have heard that some of the property owners to the south felt that they were not necessarily either included and or offered the same opportunity. We have done our best efforts to convey to them that we are fully committed to looking at the possibility of creating a project area south of I-80 for development of the inland port within the Northwest Quadrant. Obviously, that has taken on a different dynamic now with creation of the Inland Port Authority. But specifically, the second component is with regard to this program, the single property CRA process. That is available to any property owner within Salt Lake City. It's one that we have created initially with the intention of encouraging business retention and job growth. And so that is something that everyone is eligible to apply for and that we would be willing to partner with them on as long as they are meeting our goals and objectives.
So are you saying because of the single property nature of it, that's why it doesn't threaten, retroactively threaten the creation of the CRA borders?
Yeah, no, I was trying to say that the creation of the project area north of I-80 is specific to the Northwest Quadrant. Any single property CRA process like this that is also within that Port Authority jurisdiction is subject to losing the tax increment, and we want to be able to do. But this is also a program that we have citywide. And so if you're in that area, obviously we're not necessarily able to guarantee reimbursement, and I'm not sure to what extent we would have the intention or the desire to create a project area like this again because of SB 234.
Okay.
Board Member Mendenhall.
I'll echo Amy's comments of thanks to you all as the staff working so diligently through this. This is a wonderful ordinance and opportunity that we passed before, and I am excited that we can foster this kind of a relationship in a new way with existing businesses in Salt Lake City, and Stadler's a great one to start with for us. So if not for SB 234, we would probably be working even faster on this, but the ambiguity that it creates, I want to make sure to take the opportunity to soapbox for just a second on the distinction between what SB 234 aims to do by taking potentially 100% of the tax increment dollars and not spending them according to state statute around how tax increment can be spent, and not having accountable elected officials who are over the expenditure of those dollars. That is completely different than us considering a 90% increment conversation in which we are committing to a process, a public process by which a business can come back to us and request up to 90% of the tax increment. And whoever is on the board at this time, whether it's next month or 5 years from now or 10 years from now, that the process is what we are committing to and that the public is involved in that process and it is transparent. And that is a wholly different conversation than what SB 234 aims to do. So I just want to be clear, especially if the media pays attention to this, that there are some stark contrasts between 100% of tax increment taking for SB 234 and a 90% potential conversation between us and a business owner as the city.
And I would like to add that that is an excellent distinction. And furthermore, we're not even just talking the 90%. The 90% of which you refer to is the portion that the RDA gets. And that is
Yeah.
after.
School district, county.
Yeah, every other entity is still
mosquito
getting
abatement.
what they're getting. So we're just talking the Salt Lake City portion, and the RDA getting 90% of that.
That's right. I have one other distinction I want to make sure is clear, and it's back to Susie's presentation, but on the slide around Salt Lake City municipal cost of services average per year, I just want to make sure my math is right, that the Stradler project is about 62 acres total when all phases are complete, that we're looking at about $3,800 per acre per year for city expenses.
Yeah,
And
and that's,
Total's about $235 per year cost to the city per acre. We're looking at a conservative annual net revenue to the city of about $515 per year. So it's about half of the revenue, which is 500 times more than an undeveloped acre in that same area.
yeah.
Am I
And I
right?
would like to add, as part of this going to the Finance Committee, we learned that there's a lot of different ways, obviously, to calculate the expenses to the city. And in future iterations of this, we're going to continue to refine that, of meeting with city departments and understanding that. But our goal in including that in the financial benefit, if you remember, as we created this program, was really to make sure that we weren't necessarily giving too much of the city's tax increment to a use that could potentially create an additional burden of expenses to the city. And so what you're seeing there is that this is, number one, below the average in terms of expenses. Number two, it's above average in terms of the proposed value per acre. And so that's how that gets related within that financial analysis, is just making sure that we're not creating something that's going to create additional costs to the city over and above the average.
Thank you, Danny. Board Member Fowler.
Yeah, so I kind of want to go back to the, and because I think this is probably a question that needs to be addressed, just so we're clear on it. The recommendation of 70%, 80%, or 90%, and the recommendation is the full 90%. And so I'm wondering, and this may be something for Fabio and Jacob, just to talk about some of the extra, as I look at the criteria, and recognizing I'm new to this, but as I look at this criteria, the special consideration for additional participation is the project cost burden and additional public benefits. So I think just as we are considering these tax increments, it's important maybe to walk through a little bit further, again, and it may be best from Jacob and Fabio, of what those project costs are and what those additional benefits are. Certainly, one thing that popped out as you were reading that letter, Fabio, was the vocational training program. And I didn't know that you were doing that, but then that sounds awesome. So maybe you could tell us a little more about that. And then maybe Jacob, just as the project manager, to talk about some of those project costs that you've incurred at this time and are looking at as well.
So the training program that we're trying to establish is with Davis Applied Technology Community College. And what we're basically trying to do is, so in Switzerland we have a very strong apprenticeship program. So after 12 years of school, people have to decide they want to go to university or an apprenticeship program. And most of our shop workers, they go to an apprenticeship program. And so what we are trying to do is, we have some people in our company, they did the apprenticeship program as electricians in Switzerland. And now we're basically getting all their information. We're collecting all the information from Switzerland. We hand it over to the community colleges. And then we just try to implement the apprenticeship program there. So the people, they work at our company for a couple of days, and then one day a week they go to school there, and they get kind of a degree from us after 2 or 4 years.
Do you have an anticipated number of participants?
Not yet.
You don't? Okay.
Sorry.
Board Member Kitchen, I have a follow-up question to that. That was actually one of my questions was going to be, and it was to see where you were going to go to get those recruits or look for those to fill those positions. And West High School has the STEM program there where Tesoro, which is now Endeavor, they give like $90,000 a year to the STEM program there. You would have a lot of kids from Salt Lake City who would really, I think, benefit from this type of training. You know, they're already in the STEM program in the high school, and just having something they could roll into, maybe that's not what they're looking at. Maybe this is something that would take them down a different career path that I think would be extremely beneficial for Salt Lake City residents, specifically on the west side where you're going to be developing, to reach out to those kids who look for that type of job.
Thank you, Board Member Rogers. That's a really important point and an awesome opportunity. So I agree that if they can look at that, that would be a really great partnership. Board members, anything else? I know Aaron, I think, has something. I see. Board Member Johnston.
Thanks. Mine working now? Thanks again for this. A quick question on the projected infrastructure costs, project gap infrastructure costs sheet. So the costs identify were site grading, site work for the raising track, the public roads utilities, and the test track. And so the public roads utilities, the $8 million expense, I see the benefit of cooperating to get infrastructure upgrades so that future development is great out there. The other three don't seem to be sort of commonly shared benefits long-term outside of Stadler. Is that accurate or inaccurate?
I would think that the raising track, I believe that's the shared line, so that is a benefit to the area.
Fair track would be.
Yeah, the site grading is a condition of the site and the Northwest Quadrant area that several properties have that issue that are going to have to be addressed by their development. And then the test track is, that's unique to their property.
Okay. I'm just trying to wrap my head around this reality of incentives and how much comes back, because it's if after phase 4 we get the full amount, and phase 4 could be completed within the next 7 to 12 years, give or take. By 2030 we're projecting. Prior to that, do we have a breakdown of what the actual tax, the revenue would come if we only do 2 phases, the first 2 phases on the first property or the third?
In terms of when it's realized? Yeah, we built that into the model. I think Susie could speak to the details of that, of when that comes online and that's phasing.
Okay. Like I said, I'm trying to wrap my head around $9 million going back, $8 million plus in infrastructure improvements that would be commonly shared across other entities that went out there. If another entity went into a site adjacent to Stadler on the new road, so it's already built out for their infrastructure, and they applied to us for support, what would it look like from our end?
Well, number one, they would not be able to use this infrastructure cost as any part of their gap analysis. So their gap analysis would have to take into account any costs or improvements that are strictly related or unique to their site, and it would not involve any of this type of costs.
Okay.
We would pull that out as part of anything that was a burden to them.
And the 500,000, is that annual per acre? Is that total? Total, right?
I believe that's annual. if I'm
Annual?
remembering. Yeah, annual for the entire project.
That's after everything's pulled
That's
out?
after everything. And I think it's important to note also that, number one, Stadler only gets what is generated, number one. Number two, obviously if the phasing and or the values influence that, then that reduces what they get.
Okay.
And those are benchmarks that we will also build into the reimbursement agreement in terms of what the max is that they get, and then also make it very clear that if the project doesn't generate it, we are not obligated to provide that full 9.6 unless it's actually realized as tax increment.
Okay. The only other question I would have is about the wages, and using the average. I know there's a county average we can compare to. Is there a county median or other median kind of measures we can use as well that would take out very, very high, a few high wages?
Yeah, that's a good question. Susie, do they calculate a median, if you want to speak to that?
I don't know the county median offhand. We could certainly look through the list from Stadler and find the midpoint.
Yeah.
But I was pleasantly surprised when I looked through of the first 105 that you gave us a sample of, 23 of those, 24 were 70,000 and above. So I think that's a pretty good indicator. Nearly a quarter are in that range. So we didn't have just one or two pulling it really high. They were pretty tight between there and what was the top, about 120? Yeah, about 120. So I don't think we had, a $400,000 one pulling, the average way up. It seemed to be pretty tight on the scale as I looked at it. And the low end was what, 14 an hour? 14 an hour.
So 14 is the low end for
Mhm.
this? Okay. Thank you very much for the info.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
All right. We have a motion sheet in front of us, but before we move to that, is there any other question? Okay. I think it's clear that we move forward with this motion under a cloud of SB 234. And we've made that point very clear today. But I will look for a motion from my colleagues.
Chair, I move the board create the creation of the Stadler Rail Single Parcel Community Reinvestment Area Plan and the resolution authorizing the RDA Executive Director to execute the interlocal agreement between Salt Lake City Corporation and the Redevelopment Agency, committing the city's increment to the RDA at a 90% participation rate, with the following additional language to be added to the interlocal agreement. The city and RDA acknowledge that the city's commitment of tax increment to RDA for the project area development is subject to the Utah Inland Port Authority's right to take up to 100% of the tax increment generated within the project area for the purposes set forth in Utah Code 11-58-602, enacted by the Utah Legislature as SB 234 in the 2018 legislative session.
I have a motion from Board Member Fowler and a second by Board Member Mendenhall. Would you like to add any context or thoughts to your motion? Anybody have questions?
I think that we discussed everything.
Okay.
I feel good about it.
All right, then I will go ahead and roll call this one. We'll start with Board Member Johnston,
Yes.
Board Member Wharton,
Yes.
Board Member Mendenhall,
Yes.
Fowler,
Yes.
Rogers, and we have Board Member Luke not here today, and I'm a yes, so that is 6 in favor. Congratulations, and thank you for joining us today. I want to, first of all, just echo everything that's been said and appreciate staff, department heads, the effort that went into creation of this and the building the relationship with Stadler. It took a lot of individuals from City Hall, and we were really eager to bring this opportunity into our community, and Stadler's been a great partner, so thank you for that. I want to thank Susie Becker for joining us, Jacob and Fabio from Stadler, and staff, of course. Would you like to offer anything before we break?
No, just again, on behalf of the administration and Economic Development Department, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. All right, and moving along, we are on item C2, which is the report and announcements from the executive director. I will look to the administration for anything. Nothing? Okay. Anything further, Danny, RDA staff, that's your spot
just
on the agenda?
At the pleasure of the chair, if you'd like me to give a quick update on some of our properties, I'd be happy to do that.
That would be lovely. Please, go ahead.
First and foremost, we have right now 2 property offerings that are going on through an RFP and RFQ process. Those are the 255 South State property that is out right now as part of a request for qualifications. Those are due April 23rd. And then the second is the Overnighter Motel, which if you recall, we were directed by the board to purchase. That is actually also out right now under a request for proposal, and that is due May 31st. So if you know anybody who's interested in affordable housing projects, send them our way. But we're excited to have those both out on the street. Couple quick updates on some property disposition.
Or, kitchen.
Member Rogers, please go ahead.
Are you doing any like open houses in these areas for these project areas? Say, we're going to host an open house at the Overnighter, for all developers and say it's going to be all day on this day and let's have everybody out.
For these, we did not. We did not feel that they necessarily warranted any open house or initial RFP meeting. But certainly to the extent that if we get those questions from developers and we feel that that's warranted, that's something we could look at doing. So we didn't do any tours. We felt that, number one, we didn't want anyone unnecessarily going through 255 South State, so we didn't offer a property tour on that. And then the overnighter we feel is pretty visible and accessible, that if anyone wanted to reach out and look at it, they could, and then we would just be available for questions
I mean,
as needed.
not specifically about the property, but I'm talking about, hold it at the property, but say these are some ideas that you could do or opportunities that you could do with this property. I'm not talking about State Street, but
Okay.
just because.
Yeah, no, we didn't plan that, but that's something I'll talk to Amanda and see if there's some interest, and maybe we do some kind of effort like that to have an open house.
And reach out to the Note District and have them start pumping it too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a really good way to start marketing. I think that last RDA meeting, it was a real eye-opener for me when we discussed the loan extension for NeighborWorks, to find out that of those units, they only had one that they were talking to that might be under contract. I mean, this market is flush with opportunities, and not to have those, I know that it's NeighborWorks and that it's a nonprofit, but those things should be pre-sold, ready to go. I mean, that's what most developers would be doing, so.
Yeah, we can certainly look at that and try to come up with some other ideas.
Board member Luke, welcome to the meeting, and I think you have a question.
I appreciate it. Yeah, just one thought. Maybe you could, offer an overnight stay, let them sleep on the decision or something.
I'll put you down as the contact for that. All right, a couple other quick offerings. Number one, Jefferson Corner. This is the property on 156 West and 900 South. We have secured the sale of that to the Hat Trick Group. So we're looking forward to that development. Working towards activating the area. It will essentially be their headquarters of an environmentally conscious graphics company, and they will have 30 employees there. So they're working through the agreement with us on that and the development.
Board member Fowler.
Where was that again?
Hat Trick. This was 156 West, 900 South.
Okay.
So West Temple Gateway area. Staying in the West Temple Gateway area, the Jefferson Walkway project is coming to completion. They have sold 5 out of the 7 units. This is the project that has the mid-block walkway with it and the row homes along that walkway. The RDA has been fully paid back its loan 6 months earlier than ever anticipated, and so that's been an extremely successful project in terms of the demand for that. And then Spy Hop, our property at 208 East, 900 South. We've been working for quite a while now in terms of making sure the cleanup and remediation of that property is complete. That has been given the green light, and as such, we are in the process of negotiating that sale of the property for Spy Hop. And so they are looking at compiling their financing and working towards development of that. So.
Is that 208 West?
Yes.
Okay.
That is 208 West. Is that correct? Yeah, 208 West, 900 South. Sorry.
Board member Mendenhall.
Danny, on the Minneapolis trip that's coming up with the Downtown Alliance,
Yes.
that urban exploration trip, which facet, we got the agenda in our mailboxes last week, which component of that is our State Street-esque experience?
I will get back to you on that because I just asked Suze about that the other day, and she told me, and I don't remember it off the top of my head. So let me make
Okay.
sure I get the right answer and send that to
Will
you.
we have materials for that beforehand?
For the street,
Yeah.
we can get you something. It was
I
really
think
more
that
or
would be
less just
helpful.
being,
Yeah, for the record, if nothing else.
Okay.
Yeah, and I agree. I think for to prime our thinking before going in there, if we could draw some comparisons about maybe if they have a
Sure.
redevelopment area, when it happened, what kind of specific investments seem to be the greatest leverage, if human trafficking was a component in that area, if affordable housing was a priority for them, what their kind of mixed market looked like, what they what am I trying to say? The words are escaping me.
Yeah, we'll put
What their
something together.
priority of the mixed income integration was for any projects that they might have funded. Give us some comparables so we can orient ourselves to their successes and their lessons learned before we get there.
Okay.
Thanks.
We will put together a packet of information and forward that to the people who are participating on that trip.
Thanks.
Danny, did you have anything else you'd like to run through?
I did not.
Okay, appreciate that update. Board member Johnston,
One
please.
question about the overnighter. Are there still tenants in there?
There are still tenants. We, as part of our ownership of that, we engaged a consultant to work on the relocation and the assistance for that. They are actively meeting with those tenants. We are in the process of working on relocating them. So
Has there been any discussion about using that as transitional housing in the interim, or is there any time in that?
there has been discussion on that. That is something that as we relocate the tenants, we will then come back in and do an assessment of the condition of the property and to what extent we would need to improve that if we wanted to put that towards a transitional housing type of use. So that's something we've started looking at, and we're going to compile the information so we can make a determination of whether that makes sense and how we could do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, we are moving right along to the report and announcement from the chair and the vice chair. I don't know if you have anything, Board Member Fowler, but I would like to bring to the board's attention in conversations over the last few weeks with RDA staff and City Council staff about the implications and unintended consequences of SB 234. We decided in a meeting that we would at least look at drafting a letter to the taxing authorities and partners that will have appointing authority on this new inland port board. And so we've outlined a few of our concerns, starting with the boundary adjustment with Boyer and the Romney Group and the concerns that were raised there. And then obviously today with Stadler Rail. We have a couple draft copies here. I'll hand it out to you. I'd love your feedback, but I mean, I just wanted to put that out there and let you know that we'll be sending that your way. And then I also wanted to let the board know here that we, in our meeting with Danny, Laura, and RDA staff yesterday, we requested a little preview of the budget. And so if you have any thoughts leading into the budget cycle, now would be maybe a good time to express concerns or ideas or special interests that you want to give to staff. So if you have any thoughts. Otherwise, we will move along. We are now at item D, written briefings. We don't have anything. We do have an item on our consent agenda, so I will look for a motion.
Move approval.
It's been moved by Board Member Mendenhall and a second by Board Member Luke. All those in favor?
Aye.
That motion carries, and that is the end of our very short RDA meeting today. Thank you all
Try
for
to make
joining
it
us.
short. Thank you.